Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got a note from the Institute for Justice about another case they're pushing. This one's a good one, and I hope they get the result they need. Dallas bar owner asks Supreme Court to let his suit over a bogus prosecution move forward. The guy was prosecuted, and the prosecution was based on the wrong reasons, and he'd like to sue the people responsible for that. So, in a moment practically made for TV, the prosecution's case fell apart on the stand when a Dallas detective admitted that he'd been paid for years by a business that wanted this man's bar closed and had used evidence from that business to charge this man with a felony. Dallas prosecutors dropped the case, acknowledging the detective's tainted investigation was improper. So the man at the center of this is the owner of the Green Elephant in Northeast Dallas. He's asking the U.S. Supreme Court to let his lawsuit against a former Dallas Police Department detective move forward. That detective's self-motivated investigation put this man through the peril of felony prosecution. The suit, being led at the Supreme Court stage by the Institute for Justice, alleges that the detective's action violated the U.S. Constitution and state law tort for false arrest. The Institute for Justice is working with Shannon, that's the man, to get his life back on track, said IJ senior attorney Anya Bidwell. The district judge told the detective that he can't take advantage of a state law immunity at this stage, and the detective immediately appealed. The case should have moved to discovery instead of being stopped in its tracks because the detective lost on one of his defenses. So the business owner here who owns the Green Elephant has owned it for decades, and he built it into a premier venue for underground and dance music. While it's been loved by generations of SMU students, a real estate business located across the street doesn't feel the same way. In August of 2019, it saw an opportunity to get rid of the neighbor. So then there were shots fired outside the bar. After the shooting, the owner of the Green Elephant called the police and recovered some shell casings that were promptly turned over to the police. But neither this man nor any of his employees were involved in the incident. The detective was not assigned to investigate the incident, but had been tipped off to it by the real estate business for which he had worked a side job for years. Hiding the obvious conflict, the detective first tried to get the relevant detective to press charges against the bar owner and one of his security employees who was also in law enforcement. When that failed, the detective went directly to prosecutors. Using false statements, he convinced them to press felony charges for tampering with evidence. After years in court, the bar owner's co-defendant case came to trial in 2022. That again was where the detective was forced to reveal that he had a financial relationship with the real estate company that went back for years. So the bar owner says a Dallas detective tried to railroad me for a crime I didn't commit. Officers who violate constitutional rights should not get protection from courts. I hope the U.S. Supreme Court takes up my case and lets my fight for justice continue. Now, false arrest and malicious prosecution violate the U.S. Constitution, but also state law in Texas. But the detective moved to dismiss the lawsuit here, claiming immunity. When the district court denied the immunity to the detective, he appealed to the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The Institute for Justice asks the Supreme Court to let this case move forward at the district court before the appeals are considered. And that's always one of these interesting arguments that you don't think about all that often. But if we've got a lawsuit going and a court makes a ruling, can you appeal that right now or do you have to wait? Because in some places, on many of the rulings in a civil action, you have to wait till the end of the court action there before you appeal, because a lot of this stuff can kind of come out in the wash. But there's also a thing called an interlocutory appeal where you can file an appeal before the case is even done where you are. And the argument, of course, is that this is such an important issue that waiting till the end of the case to raise it on appeal would mean that we got to relitigate everything. But when officers with hidden personal motivations target people for criminal investigation, they violate the Constitution, says IJ attorney John Korevic. Lower courts have regularly let government officials delay and duck having to defend their conduct. The Supreme Court should stop lower courts from creating new hurdles for people to jump through when seeking justice. So this is part of the Project on Immunity and Accountability for the Institute for Justice. They seek to ensure that every right guaranteed by the Constitution has a remedy in an American court. IJ is currently helping people seeking accountability after being improperly detained in California, Arizona, and Florida. IJ recently settled a case that made its way to the Supreme Court on behalf of a Texas councilwoman falsely arrested by her political opponents. And that's the problem. And understand this, that there is a function that makes sense to say that government officials can't just be sued for everything they do or anything they do, okay? So let's suppose that there's a city council person and you don't like what they're doing. They voted the wrong way last night. You sue them. Well, they vote the other way, somebody else sues them. So you can't just sue everybody for everything. But the question is, if you give them a little bit of protection for their official acts, what about when they do something egregious beyond what their official acts are? So a detective who's doing his job or her job, you can't sue them just because they're doing their job. Police officer showed up and asked me some questions. I didn't like that. I'm going to sue him. Well, that's their job. They ask questions. Now, when the detective has a financial stake in a case that he's not involved in and goes to the prosecutor and says, hey, you should prosecute that guy over there, even though I'm not involved in the case, and I've got a financial incentive to be here talking to you, which I won't disclose until I'm on the stand and embarrass everybody. You see where the problem is. And this is one of those things where sometimes on a scale or a spectrum or whatever, pendulum, whatever you want to call it, on one side, you can completely understand why it makes sense that you can't just, oh, the police officer arrested me, I'm going to sue him. But he arrested you because he committed a crime and you got prosecuted and found guilty. Yeah, but I'm going to sue him anyways. I didn't like it. He arrested me. Well, obviously, if he arrested you for something you actually did and you're found guilty, that's the job, right? But on the other hand, arresting the wrong person on made-up evidence or whatever it might be, that's not their job. And there needs to be some accountability there. And so some of these things have gone way too far in the wrong direction, and it's time to ratchet it back. So the Institute for Justice got involved in this case, and now they're asking the Supreme Court to make a ruling, so that's pretty cool. I got to point out to you, as I always do, the Institute for Justice is a nonprofit organization. They handle cases that most people could not afford to push because it's so expensive, especially to take a case to the U.S. Supreme Court. And most of these aren't easy cases. Most of these are not cases like, oh, just file the lawsuit and you'll win. No, file the lawsuit and you'll lose. Go up on appeal, you'll lose. Go up to the Supreme Court, you might win. By the time you're there, you can't afford it. You can't. So they exist solely because of the fact that they're supported by people who have like-minded beliefs about our legal system. So through strategic litigation, training, communication, activism, legislative outreach, and research, the Institute for Justice advances a rule of law under which individuals can control their destinies as free and responsible members of society. IJ litigates to secure economic liberty, educational choice, private property rights, freedom of speech, and other vital individual liberties, and to restore constitutional limits on the power of government. So I'm going to put a link to them in the description below the video. And all I ask you to do is support them any way you can, whether it's moral support, financial support, whatever. Bookmark their page, check it out, sign up for their newsletter. It's free, and you'll learn about what they do, and you're going to agree with me that they're doing great work. They do a lot of stuff involving qualified immunity and civil asset forfeiture and free speech, and these are all things that we are all deeply invested in with respect to what we care about. So they're doing great work. They got another case. We'll see what happens. Andrew Weimer sent that. Thank you, my friend. IJ.org. Dallas bar owner asks Supreme Court to let his suit over bogus prosecution move forward. Questions or comments? Put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.